The crystal chandeliers of the Meridian Club cast dancing shadows across the mahogany conference table where 12 of the city's most powerful business leaders gathered for their monthly dinner. Marcus Sterling adjusted his platinum cufflinks and surveyed the room with the satisfaction of a man who had built a $40 million logistics empire from nothing. His wife Elena sat beside him, her posture elegant but quiet, the way she always carried herself at these gatherings. Before we dive into this incredible story of underestimation and ultimate justice, I'm curious where you're watching from tonight. Whether you're in New York, Texas, or anywhere else, this tale of hidden power and shocking revelations will definitely resonate with anyone who's ever been dismissed or underestimated in a professional setting. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair as the appetizers arrived, his voice carrying easily across the table. The quarterly numbers had been exceptional, and tonight was about celebrating another record-breaking year. Sterling Logistics had secured 3 major contracts in the past month alone, each worth millions in revenue. Elena listened as the conversation naturally shifted to market trends and economic forecasts. She had always found these discussions fascinating, though her husband preferred she remain decorative rather than participatory at such events. When petroleum futures came up, she noticed how several of the men seemed to misunderstand the underlying supply chain disruptions happening in Eastern Europe. Marcus was in full storytelling mode, regaling the table with tales of his latest acquisition. He had purchased a smaller competing firm for $8 million, convinced it would streamline their operations. The other executives nodded approvingly as he described his vision for integration and cost-cutting measures. Elena shifted slightly in her seat. She had quietly reviewed the acquisition documents Marcus left scattered across his home office, and something about the target company's debt structure concerned her. Their overseas subsidiaries carried unusual derivative positions that could become problematic if currency markets shifted. But Marcus had made it clear that business strategy was his domain alone. The conversation moved to technology investments, with several executives debating the future of automated warehousing systems. Marcus dominated the discussion, outlining his 5-year plan to modernize Sterling Logistics infrastructure. His confidence was infectious, and the other business leaders hung on his every word. When Elena quietly suggested that artificial intelligence integration might face regulatory hurdles that could delay implementation timelines, Marcus turned to her with that indulgent smile she had come to recognize. "My wife reads a lot of business magazines," he said, his tone carrying just enough condescension to make the other men chuckle. "She thinks that makes her qualified to advise Fortune 500 executives." Elena felt the familiar flush of embarrassment but maintained her composure. She had learned over their 8-year marriage that public correction only made these situations worse. Instead, she took a sip of wine and retreated into observation mode, watching the dynamics around the table with the analytical precision that Marcus never bothered to notice. The conversation shifted to labor negotiations, and Marcus launched into a passionate defense of his hardline approach with union representatives. He believed in maintaining strict control over personnel costs, and his recent contract negotiations had saved the company nearly $2 million annually. The other executives praised his tough negotiating stance. Elena remembered the late-night phone calls she had overheard, conversations that suggested the union leadership was more sophisticated than Marcus realized. Their representative had advanced degrees in economics and labor law, and seemed to be playing a longer strategic game than Marcus understood. But pointing this out would only invite another round of public dismissal. As the main course arrived, the discussion turned to emerging markets and international expansion opportunities. Marcus outlined his aggressive plans to open facilities in Southeast Asia, convinced that lower labor costs would dramatically improve profit margins. His enthusiasm was evident as he described site visits and preliminary negotiations with local partners. Elena had spent considerable time researching those same markets during her seemingly idle afternoons. The political instability and regulatory complexity in several target countries presented risks that Marcus seemed to dismiss entirely. Currency volatility alone could wipe out any labor savings within 18 months. But she knew better than to voice these concerns in front of his peers. The evening progressed with Marcus holding court, his confidence growing with each glass of wine. He told stories about outmaneuvering competitors and securing exclusive contracts through sheer determination and business acumen. The other executives listened with genuine admiration, clearly viewing him as a rising star in the logistics industry. When coffee and dessert arrived, the conversation became more casual and personal. Marcus began sharing amusing anecdotes about the challenges of managing a large workforce, particularly the amusing suggestions he received from unexpected sources. He smiled warmly at Elena before delivering the line that would echo through both their minds for months to come. "You should hear some of the business advice I get at home," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the table with practiced comedic timing. "My beautiful wife here thinks she understands corporate strategy. I keep telling her she'd never last 5 minutes in real business, but she insists on sharing her theories anyway." The laughter that followed was polite but genuine, the kind of chuckling that successful men reserve for harmless domestic humor. Elena smiled graciously and played her expected role, though she mentally cataloged every face around that table. These were the same executives who would remember this moment very differently in the months to come. As the evening wound down and conversations broke into smaller groups, Elena excused herself to the ladies' room. In the mirror, she studied her reflection and thought about the phone call she had received that afternoon. The venture capital firm had finally completed their due diligence, and the terms they were offering for her new company exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Marcus was still entertaining his audience when she returned, completely unaware that his wife had just secured backing for what would become his most formidable competitor. The irony was not lost on Elena as she listened to him describe his invincible market position and unshakable client relationships. The ride home was quiet, with Marcus basking in the afterglow of another successful networking evening. He talked about potential partnerships and upcoming opportunities while Elena gazed out the window at the city lights. In less than 6 months, half of the men who had laughed at his joke tonight would be taking meetings with her instead. 3 weeks after the Meridian Club dinner, Sterling Logistics faced its first serious crisis in over 2 years. The automated sorting system at their largest distribution center had experienced cascading failures, creating a backlog that threatened to delay shipments for 6 major clients. Marcus paced behind his mahogany desk, alternating between phone calls with increasingly frustrated customers and heated conversations with his engineering team. Elena sat in the corner of his office, ostensibly there to help with scheduling, but actually listening to every technical detail. She understood immediately that the problem wasn't mechanical, but algorithmic. The sorting software was designed for consistent package weights and dimensions, but recent contract modifications had introduced irregular cargo that confused the system's decision trees. When Marcus finally paused between calls, Elena quietly suggested that they might consider implementing adaptive routing protocols that could handle variable inputs. Marcus looked at her as if she had spoken in ancient Greek, then shook his head with visible frustration. "Honey, this is complex engineering, not party planning," he said, his voice carrying the edge that appeared whenever business pressure mounted. The following morning brought an emergency board meeting that Elena attended only because Marcus needed someone to take notes. The 12-member board filled the conference room with an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. The distribution crisis had already cost them 1 major account, and 2 others were demanding immediate solutions or they would terminate their contracts. Elena sat silently in the corner with her notepad, watching the board members struggle with concepts she found elementary. When Director Harrison suggested hiring expensive consultants to redesign their entire system, Elena realized they were about to waste millions on a problem that required hours of coding, not months of restructuring. She raised her hand tentatively, knowing she was breaking protocol, but unable to watch them make such a costly mistake. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "Perhaps," she began carefully, "we might consider a phased approach that updates the existing algorithms rather than replacing the entire infrastructure." Marcus's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. "Elena, sweetheart, these gentlemen have decades of experience running major corporations," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Maybe you could focus on taking accurate notes instead of playing business consultant." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena returned to her notepad, but not before noticing that Chief Technology Officer David Chun was studying her with unmistakable interest. Later, As the meeting concluded with a decision to spend $4 million on external consultants, Chen approached her quietly. "You were right about the phased approach," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen similar implementations work exactly as you described." Elena simply smiled and gathered her things, but she noticed Chen's business card discreetly placed beside her notepad. The humiliation campaign intensified over the following weeks. Marcus seemed to take particular pleasure in dismissing Elena's observations in front of employees, especially the rising stars in his organization. During a strategy session with his senior sales team, Elena mentioned that she had noticed unusual patterns in their European shipping data that might indicate market opportunities. Marcus laughed loudly, drawing attention from the entire room. "My wife thinks she's found some hidden treasure in our shipping reports," he announced to the assembled team. "Next thing you know, she'll be telling us how to negotiate contracts and manage personnel." The sales managers laughed on cue, though Elena noticed that Regional Director Sarah Kim looked uncomfortable with the exchange. Later that week, Elena attended the company's quarterly celebration at Marcus's insistence. She was expected to play the supportive wife role, circulating among employees and their spouses, while Marcus delivered his standard motivational speech about exceeding expectations and building toward an even more successful future. During the cocktail reception, Elena found herself in conversation with several mid-level managers who seemed genuinely interested in her perspective on industry trends. Operations Manager Michael Torres mentioned the ongoing challenges with their automated systems, and Elena offered some insights about machine learning applications in logistics optimization. Torres listened intently as Elena explained concepts that their expensive consultants had failed to articulate clearly. Her understanding of predictive analytics and supply chain modeling was sophisticated and practical, showing familiarity with real-world implementations that impressed the veteran manager. Marcus appeared at Elena's elbow just as Torres was asking about her background in systems analysis. "What are you boring poor Michael with now?" "Darling," Marcus interrupted with his practiced smile. "My wife reads too many tech magazines and thinks that makes her qualified to solve engineering problems. Michael, you should probably focus on what our actual experts are recommending." Torres nodded politely, but made eye contact with Elena that suggested their conversation wasn't finished. As Marcus steered her away toward other guests, Elena noticed several employees watching the exchange with expressions that ranged from sympathy to curiosity. The pattern continued through the following month. Elena would offer carefully considered insights during casual conversations, only to have Marcus publicly dismiss her contributions as the naive observations of someone who didn't understand real business complexity. But his dismissals were having an unintended effect. Key employees began seeking Elena out for informal conversations. They approached her at company events, called her with questions about industry developments, and gradually revealed their growing doubts about Marcus's strategic direction. Elena listened carefully and offered guidance that proved remarkably accurate and valuable. David Chun was the first to directly ask about her professional background. Over coffee at a discreet location away from the office, Elena carefully revealed that she held advanced degrees in business administration and systems engineering, with particular expertise in logistics optimization and international trade regulation. Chen stared at her in amazement. "Marcus doesn't know, does he?" Chen asked. Elena smiled quietly and explained that her husband preferred to see her as decorative rather than analytical. Chen began sharing his concerns about Marcus's recent technical decisions, many of which Elena had privately predicted would fail. The phone calls became more frequent and more substantial. Elena found herself consulting informally for Chun, Torres, Kim, and several other key employees who valued her strategic insights far more than their official leadership did. They began meeting regularly, ostensibly as social gatherings, but actually as strategic planning sessions that Marcus never knew existed. Elena's evening schedule filled with research and analysis that she conducted from her home office, while Marcus watched television or worked on emails. She maintained extensive databases tracking industry developments, competitive intelligence, and market opportunities that Sterling Logistics was missing entirely. When Marcus discovered Elena working late one evening, surrounded by financial reports and market analysis documents, he assumed she was pursuing some kind of hobby. "That's nice, honey," he said condescendingly. "It's good that you have interests to keep you busy while I handle the real business challenges." Elena simply smiled and continued her work, knowing that her real business challenges were far more complex and consequential than Marcus could imagine. The next morning brought news that two more major clients had expressed dissatisfaction with Sterling Logistics service levels and were considering alternative providers. Elena had predicted this development 3 weeks earlier in her private analyses, but Marcus remained convinced that superior customer relationships would overcome any operational shortcomings. His confidence was beginning to look less like leadership and more like dangerous delusion to the employees who understood what was really happening in their industry. The monthly management meeting brought another public humiliation that crossed new boundaries. Elena had prepared detailed notes about emerging regulatory changes that would affect international shipping requirements, thinking Marcus might find the information useful for strategic planning. When she attempted to share this research during a break in the meeting, Marcus cut her off with unprecedented harshness. "Elena, sweetheart, why don't you focus on planning dinner parties and charity events?" he said in front of 15 senior managers. "Leave the regulatory analysis to people who actually understand how business and government interact." The silence that followed was thick with embarrassment, though not entirely for Elena. Several managers looked genuinely shocked by Marcus's cruelty, and Elena realized that his behavior was beginning to damage his leadership credibility among his own team. As the meeting resumed, Elena noticed Sarah Kim passing a note to David Chun, followed by meaningful glances toward Michael Torres. She had inadvertently become the catalyst for something much larger than anyone realized, including Marcus himself. The crisis arrived exactly as Elena had predicted, though Marcus remained oblivious to the precision of her forecasting. Hartwell Industries, Sterling Logistics' largest client representing 32% of annual revenue, scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss what they diplomatically termed operational concerns. Their CEO, Jonathan Hartwell, had built his manufacturing empire on reliability, and recent shipping delays were threatening his own customer relationships. Marcus prepared for the meeting with his characteristic confidence, certain that personal charm and historical performance would smooth over any temporary difficulties. He spent the morning rehearsing talking points about system upgrades and process improvements, completely dismissing Elena's quiet suggestion that Hartwell might be more concerned with strategic vision than tactical fixes. Elena had spent considerable time analyzing Hartwell's supply chain requirements and understood that their frustration went far deeper than recent delays. The manufacturing giant was expanding into just-in-time delivery systems that required predictive logistics capabilities Sterling Logistics simply didn't possess. More troubling, Elena's research revealed that Hartwell was already conducting preliminary discussions with 3 competing logistics providers. The meeting took place in Hartwell's imposing conference room, with Jonathan Hartwell flanked by his operations director and chief financial officer. Marcus arrived with his standard presentation materials and supreme confidence, while Elena accompanied him ostensibly to take notes, but actually to observe dynamics that Marcus wouldn't recognize. Hartwell got straight to the point. "Marcus, we've worked together successfully for 8 years, but recent performance issues have forced us to reconsider our logistics partnerships. The automated sorting failures, delayed shipments, and lack of predictive capabilities are becoming unacceptable for our manufacturing schedules." Marcus launched into his prepared defense, emphasizing Sterling Logistics' track record and outlining the expensive consultant recommendations that would supposedly resolve all technical issues. He spoke passionately about system upgrades and process reengineering, painting a picture of inevitable improvement through traditional solutions. Elena watched Hartwell's expression grow increasingly skeptical as Marcus failed to address the fundamental strategic misalignment. When Marcus finished his presentation, Hartwell asked pointed questions about artificial intelligence integration, predictive analytics, and adaptive logistics modeling that Marcus couldn't answer with any real understanding. Elena found herself in an impossible position, knowing exactly how to address Hartwell's concerns while being unable to speak without triggering Marcus's fury. She sat silently as the meeting deteriorated, watching Marcus promise capabilities that Sterling Logistics couldn't deliver while dismissing concerns that were entirely valid. The meeting concluded with Hartwell requesting a detailed technical proposal within 2 weeks, along with concrete timelines for implementing predictive logistics capabilities. As they left the building, Marcus remained optimistic about salvaging the relationship, convinced that his consultants would provide adequate solutions. Elena knew better. That evening, while Marcus celebrated what he considered a successful damage control meeting, she quietly reached out to David Chun through encrypted messaging. The conversation that followed confirmed her worst fears about Sterling Logistics' technical capabilities and Marcus's fundamental misunderstanding of their situation. Chun had been conducting his own analysis of the company's strategic position, and his conclusions aligned perfectly with Elena's assessments. The expensive consultants were recommending outdated solutions to problems they didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, competitors were implementing advanced technologies that would make Sterling Logistics obsolete within 18 months. The following week brought a series of smaller crises that revealed the extent of Marcus's strategic blindness. Two mid-sized clients terminated their contracts, citing service reliability concerns. A regulatory audit uncovered compliance gaps in their international shipping procedures. Most damaging, 3 key engineers resigned to join competitors, taking valuable institutional knowledge with them. Elena watched these developments with professional detachment, having anticipated each problem through her private research and analysis. She had developed comprehensive solutions for every issue, but Marcus's dismissive attitude made it impossible to share her insights constructively. The situation reached a breaking point during the monthly senior staff meeting. Marcus attempted to project confidence while discussing multiple concurrent crises, but his explanations revealed dangerous gaps in his understanding of both technical and regulatory challenges. When operations manager Michael Torres suggested that they might need more sophisticated analytics capabilities, Marcus dismissed the idea as expensive technological complexity that wouldn't improve basic operational efficiency. Elena realized that Marcus was actively rejecting the exact solutions that could save his company. After the meeting, Torres approached Elena with unprecedented directness. He requested a private conversation away from the office, suggesting they meet at a neutral location where they could speak freely about strategic concerns. Their coffee meeting revealed that Torres had been quietly researching Elena's professional background through industry contacts. His discoveries had shocked him. Elena held dual master's degrees from prestigious institutions, had consulted for Fortune 100 companies before her marriage, and maintained active relationships with some of the logistics industry's most innovative leaders. Torres explained that several senior employees had been conducting informal research into Elena's qualifications after noticing the sophisticated nature of her business insights. They had discovered that she possessed exactly the expertise Sterling Logistics needed to address their current challenges. The conversation shifted to Marcus's leadership style and strategic decision-making. Torres expressed growing concerns about the company's direction and Marcus's apparent inability to recognize emerging industry trends. He revealed that other key employees shared these doubts and were beginning to explore alternative career opportunities. Elena listened carefully to Torres's concerns while sharing selected insights about market developments and technological trends that Marcus was ignoring. She provided analysis that clarified complex strategic challenges Torres had been struggling to understand. Their discussion revealed that Sterling Logistics was facing an existential crisis that Marcus refused to acknowledge. Competitors were implementing technologies and business models that would fundamentally disrupt the traditional logistics industry. Companies that failed to adapt quickly would lose market share rapidly and potentially face bankruptcy. Elena's analysis suggested that Sterling Logistics had perhaps 6 months to implement comprehensive strategic changes before their competitive position became untenable. Torres realized that Marcus lacked both the vision and the technical understanding necessary to navigate this transformation. The following week brought confirmation of Elena's predictions. Hartwell Industries formally terminated their contract, citing Sterling Logistics' inability to provide the predictive capabilities required for their expanded operations. The loss represented not just immediate revenue, but credibility damage that would make replacing Hartwell extremely difficult. Marcus responded to the Hartwell loss with characteristic denial and blame deflection. He attributed the decision to unreasonable client expectations and assured his staff that other opportunities would compensate for the lost revenue. His confidence remained unshaken despite mounting evidence that his strategic approach was fundamentally flawed. Elena received a series of discreet communications from key employees seeking guidance about industry developments and career strategies. Sarah Kim requested analysis of emerging market opportunities. David Chen asked for technical insights about automation technologies. Even senior sales representatives began approaching Elena for perspective on client relationship management. These conversations revealed that Marcus's dismissive public treatment of Elena had backfired spectacularly. Rather than reinforcing his authority, his behavior had prompted employees to investigate Elena's background and capabilities independently. Their discoveries had established Elena as a trusted advisor while undermining confidence in Marcus's leadership. The month concluded with news that Sterling Logistics' second-largest client was conducting a formal review of their logistics partnership, citing performance concerns similar to those raised by Hartwell Industries. Elena had predicted this development 6 weeks earlier, but Marcus remained convinced that superior customer service would overcome any operational shortcomings. Elena spent her evenings conducting detailed competitive analysis and developing comprehensive strategic recommendations that could potentially save Marcus's company. She knew exactly what needed to be done and had the industry relationships necessary to implement solutions quickly and effectively. But Marcus's arrogance and public dismissal of her capabilities had created an impossible situation where she couldn't help him even if she wanted to. Instead, Elena began receiving increasingly serious inquiries from his own employees about opportunities to work with someone who actually understood where their industry was heading. The emergency at Peterson Manufacturing arrived at 7:30 on a Thursday morning, threatening to destroy what remained of Sterling Logistics' reputation in the automotive supply chain. Their production line had shut down due to delayed critical components, with every hour of downtime costing them $60,000 in lost productivity. Peterson's CEO demanded immediate answers and solutions, or Sterling Logistics would face a lawsuit for breach of contract. Marcus was in Chicago for a conference when the crisis erupted, leaving operations manager Torres scrambling to manage a situation that required expertise the company supposedly lacked. The Peterson account represented $8 million in annual revenue and served as a reference point for other automotive manufacturers considering logistics partnerships. Torres called Elena directly, bypassing normal protocols in his desperation. "We need someone who understands international shipping regulations and customs procedures immediately," he explained, his voice tight with stress. Elena could hear the chaos in the background as Peterson's team demanded updates every 15 minutes. Elena arrived at Sterling Logistics within 30 minutes, carrying a briefcase containing research materials she had compiled months earlier. She walked directly into the Crisis Management Center, where 6 employees were struggling with problems that seemed insurmountable without Marcus's leadership. The Peterson components were trapped in customs due to documentation discrepancies that stemmed from recent regulatory changes in international trade compliance. Marcus's team had been using outdated procedures that no longer satisfied governmental requirements, creating delays that cascaded through multiple shipping channels. Elena reviewed the customs documentation with precision that stunned the assembled staff. She identified 3 specific regulatory violations and outlined a comprehensive solution that addressed both immediate needs and systemic compliance gaps. Her understanding of international trade law was sophisticated and current, demonstrating expertise that none of them had suspected. Within 2 hours, Elena had contacted appropriate regulatory officials, submitted corrected documentation, and arranged expedited processing that would release the Peterson components before their production window closed. She coordinated with customs brokers, shipping supervisors, and Peterson's procurement team with the efficiency of someone who had managed similar crises professionally. David Chen watched Elena orchestrate the solution with growing amazement. Her command of logistics protocols, regulatory frameworks, and international trade procedures exceeded anything he had witnessed from Marcus or the expensive consultants. When she completed a complex customs calculation in her head that would have required their software systems, Chen realized they were observing genuine expertise. The Peterson crisis resolved successfully, but its aftermath created shockwaves throughout Sterling Logistics that Elena couldn't contain. Torres immediately began researching Elena's professional background more thoroughly, using industry databases and professional networks to verify what he had witnessed. His discoveries were extraordinary. Elena had graduated magna cum laude from Wharton Business School with dual concentrations in international trade and operations management. She had spent 5 years as a senior consultant with McKinsey, specializing in logistics optimization for Fortune 500 companies. Her client list included some of the most successful supply chain operations in North America. Torres shared his findings discreetly with Chun and Kim, who conducted their own verification through professional contacts. Elena's reputation within the logistics consulting community was impeccable. Former colleagues described her as brilliant, strategic, and capable of solving problems that other consultants couldn't even diagnose properly. The revelation cascade accelerated when Kim discovered Elena's involvement with Meridian Capital Partners, a prestigious investment firm specializing in logistics and transportation companies. Elena served as a strategic advisor, providing market analysis and due diligence for potential acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Chun used his technology industry connections to verify Elena's technical credentials, discovering that she held certifications in advanced systems analysis and had published research papers on artificial intelligence applications in supply chain management. Her work had been cited extensively by industry leaders implementing predictive logistics technologies. The employees who had witnessed Elena's crisis management capabilities began connecting privately, sharing information and insights that painted a picture of extraordinary professional competence that Marcus had either ignored or actively suppressed. They realized that Sterling Logistics employed someone who could solve their strategic challenges immediately if given appropriate authority. Elena's strategic recommendations from months earlier proved prophetic as competitors began implementing the exact technologies and business models she had described. Companies that followed her predicted development paths gained significant market advantages, while Sterling Logistics fell further behind. Torres discovered that Elena maintained active consulting relationships with 3 major logistics firms that were Sterling Logistics' primary competitors. Her insights were helping them anticipate market trends and develop strategic responses that Sterling Logistics couldn't match because Marcus dismissed her expertise entirely. The revelation that stunned everyone came when Kim learned about Elena's personal investment portfolio. Through discreet inquiries with financial industry contacts, Kim discovered that Elena had built substantial positions in logistics technology companies and transportation infrastructure funds that were generating exceptional returns. Elena's investment strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of industry dynamics that far exceeded Marcus's comprehension. She had identified emerging technologies and market opportunities years before they became obvious to mainstream investors, building wealth that dwarfed Sterling Logistics' net worth. Chun approached Elena directly about her background, requesting a private meeting where she could speak freely about her professional experience and current activities. Elena agreed, recognizing that her secret was becoming impossible to maintain as more employees discovered the truth about her qualifications. Their conversation revealed that Elena had been conducting comprehensive analysis of Sterling Logistics' competitive position for over a year, developing detailed strategic recommendations that could transform the company's prospects immediately. She had identified specific technology investments, market opportunities, and operational improvements that would position Sterling Logistics as an industry leader. Elena explained that her marriage to Marcus had created an impossible professional situation where her expertise was not just undervalued but actively rejected. She had watched Sterling Logistics make preventable mistakes while being unable to offer solutions that could preserve the company and protect employee jobs. The strategic plan Elena had developed privately was sophisticated and comprehensive, addressing every challenge Sterling Logistics faced while identifying growth opportunities that Marcus couldn't recognize. Her analysis suggested that proper implementation could triple company revenue within 18 months, while establishing sustainable competitive advantages. Chun realized that Sterling Logistics employed someone capable of transforming their industry position dramatically, but Marcus's arrogance and public dismissal of Elena's capabilities made utilizing her expertise impossible within the current organizational structure. Meanwhile, Marcus remained completely oblivious to these developments. He returned from Chicago confident that the Peterson crisis had been resolved through his remote leadership and superior crisis management protocols. He praised his team's execution while taking personal credit for strategic decisions that Elena had actually implemented. Elena watched Marcus celebrate his supposed crisis management success, while the employees who knew the truth exchanged meaningful glances across the room. The disconnect between Marcus's perception and reality had become so extreme that his credibility among senior staff was evaporating rapidly. The final revelation came when Torres discovered Elena's connection to Blackstone Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring and restructuring logistics companies. Elena served as their primary industry analyst, identifying acquisition targets and developing transformation strategies for underperforming companies. Torres realized that Elena possessed not just strategic expertise, but financial resources and industry connections that could reshape Sterling Logistics entirely. Her network included investors, technology providers, and industry leaders who could provide capital and capabilities that Marcus couldn't access independently. The employees who had discovered Elena's true background began meeting informally to discuss their situation. They recognized that Sterling Logistics faced existential challenges that Marcus couldn't address, while employing someone who possessed exactly the expertise and resources needed for survival and growth. Elena's position had become untenable in every direction. She could save Marcus's company easily, but couldn't act while he continued dismissing her publicly. Meanwhile, other opportunities beckoned from investors and companies that valued her expertise appropriately and would provide resources matching her capabilities. The revelation cascade was complete, leaving Marcus isolated in his ignorance while his key employees understood that their company's fate depended on someone whose authority Marcus would never recognize voluntarily. The quarterly board meeting arrived with Sterling Logistics facing its worst financial crisis in company history. 3 major clients had terminated contracts, operational costs were spiraling beyond control, and the expensive consultant recommendations had produced no measurable improvements. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled desperation. Elena attended the meeting with a different energy than before. Instead of sitting quietly in the corner taking notes, she positioned herself strategically where every board member could observe her reactions. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Director Harrison opened with devastating news about their credit rating downgrade, followed by concerns from their primary lender about loan covenant violations. The company faced potential bankruptcy within 6 months unless dramatic improvements materialized immediately. Marcus attempted to project optimism while outlining his recovery strategy, but his proposals lacked substance and credibility. When Marcus finished his presentation, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Board members exchanged glances that suggested confidence in his leadership had evaporated entirely. Director Martinez finally voiced what everyone was thinking about: needing fresh strategic perspective and possibly outside expertise. Elena stood slowly, her movement commanding attention throughout the room. "With your permission," she said, addressing the board directly rather than seeking Marcus's approval, "I would like to share some observations about our current situation and potential solutions." Marcus stared at her in shock, but before he could respond, Chairman Roberts nodded for Elena to continue. The power dynamic in the room shifted visibly as Elena walked to the presentation screen and began outlining a comprehensive analysis that stunned everyone present. Elena's presentation was masterful, demonstrating intimate knowledge of Sterling Logistics operations combined with sophisticated understanding of industry trends and competitive dynamics. She identified specific operational inefficiencies, explained why current recovery efforts were failing, and outlined a detailed transformation strategy that could restore profitability within 12 months. The board members leaned forward as Elena explained how predictive analytics could optimize routing decisions, how strategic partnerships could reduce capital requirements, and how technology investments could create sustainable competitive advantages. Her understanding of financial structures, market opportunities, and operational excellence was encyclopedic. Director Chun, no relation to employee David Chun, asked pointed questions about implementation timelines and resource requirements. Elena answered each inquiry with precision that revealed extensive preparation and professional expertise that made Marcus's earlier presentation look amateurish by comparison. When Elena outlined potential partnership opportunities with technology providers and logistics specialists, she mentioned specific companies and executives by name, describing ongoing conversations and preliminary terms that demonstrated active strategic networking that nobody had suspected. Marcus finally found his voice, attempting to regain control of the meeting. "Elena, sweetheart, this is very interesting, but these gentlemen need practical solutions, not theoretical frameworks," he said, his voice carrying the condescension that had become his trademark response to her contributions. Director Roberts looked at Marcus with undisguised surprise. "Marcus, Elena just outlined the most comprehensive strategic analysis we've heard in months," he said firmly. "Her recommendations address every concern we've raised about the company's direction. Perhaps we should focus on the substance rather than dismissing the source." The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable, and Elena watched Marcus realize that his usual dismissive tactics were no longer working. The board wanted strategic leadership, and Elena had just demonstrated capabilities that Marcus couldn't match or replicate. Elena continued her presentation by revealing her professional background and current consulting activities. The board learned about her McKinsey experience, Wharton education, and ongoing advisory roles with Meridian Capital and Blackstone Ventures. Their expressions shifted from surprise to amazement as they understood the expertise that had been sitting unused in their company for years. The meeting concluded with the board requesting detailed written proposals from Elena for immediate implementation. They asked her to prepare comprehensive strategic recommendations within 1 week, effectively bypassing Marcus's authority and establishing Elena as their primary strategic advisor. Marcus left the meeting in stunned silence, finally understanding that his position had become untenable while Elena possessed resources and capabilities he had never imagined. The ride home was tense, with Marcus alternating between anger and desperate attempts to understand how his wife had acquired such sophisticated business expertise. That evening, Elena received a phone call that changed everything permanently. Blackstone Ventures had completed their evaluation of her independent consulting proposal and were offering her $50 million in initial funding to launch a competing logistics firm with herself as CEO and majority owner. Elena had been quietly developing this opportunity for 8 months, using her industry connections and strategic insights to design a company that would implement every innovation Sterling Logistics had rejected. Her business plan combined advanced technology, strategic partnerships, and operational excellence to create a logistics operation that would make traditional companies obsolete. The following morning brought a cascade of developments that accelerated the power shift beyond Marcus's ability to control. David Chen requested a private meeting where he formally asked Elena about opportunities to join her new venture as Chief Technology Officer. He had recognized that Sterling Logistics could not survive under Marcus's leadership. Elena confirmed that she was indeed launching Phoenix Logistics within 60 days and that she would welcome applications from qualified Sterling Logistics employees who understood the industry's future direction. Chen became the first official defection, submitting his resignation that afternoon. Sarah Kim approached Elena the same day with similar intentions, followed by Michael Torres and 6 other senior employees who had witnessed Elena's strategic capabilities and lost confidence in Marcus's leadership entirely. They understood that Elena offered their only opportunity for professional growth within an industry that was transforming rapidly. Elena scheduled individual meetings with each interested employee, outlining Phoenix Logistics' strategic vision and explaining how their experience would contribute to building a superior logistics operation. Her presentations were detailed and compelling, offering equity participation and leadership roles that Sterling Logistics could never provide. Marcus discovered the employee departures when Chen submitted his formal resignation, citing strategic differences and limited growth opportunities under current management. Marcus attempted to negotiate retention packages, but Chen explained that he had accepted a position with better alignment to his professional goals. When Torres and Kim submitted their resignations the following day, Marcus began understanding the scope of what was happening. His key employees were leaving for opportunities that offered superior strategic direction and growth potential than Sterling Logistics could provide. Elena's activities became impossible to hide when news broke about Phoenix Logistics' formation and initial funding round. Industry publications reported that a new logistics company had secured substantial venture capital backing and was recruiting experienced professionals from established firms throughout the region. Marcus confronted Elena directly about the newspaper article mentioning her name as Phoenix Logistics founder and CEO. Elena confirmed that she had indeed launched a new company and was implementing the strategic recommendations that Sterling Logistics had rejected consistently. The conversation that followed was devastating for Marcus as Elena revealed the full extent of her professional network, financial resources, and strategic planning that had been developing parallel to his company's decline. She explained that Phoenix Logistics would implement every innovation he had dismissed while recruiting the talent he had failed to retain. Elena described her relationships with technology providers who would give Phoenix Logistics competitive advantages that Sterling Logistics couldn't access independently. Her connections with investors, clients, and industry leaders provided resources and opportunities that Marcus had never understood were available. Marcus realized that Elena possessed not just superior strategic vision, but the financial backing and professional relationships necessary to destroy his company completely. Phoenix Logistics would compete directly with Sterling Logistics using better technology, superior talent, and strategic advantages that made the outcome inevitable. The final blow came when Elena revealed that 3 major logistics clients had already signed preliminary agreements with Phoenix Logistics based on her strategic presentations and operational proposals. These companies valued expertise over relationships and recognized that Elena offered capabilities their current providers couldn't match. Elena's transformation from dismissed wife to formidable competitor was complete, leaving Marcus facing the reality that his arrogance and dismissive behavior had created his most dangerous adversary. Phoenix Logistics would launch with everything Sterling Logistics lacked, led by someone who understood his weaknesses better than he understood them himself. The power shift was irreversible, with Elena controlling resources and opportunities that could either save or destroy Sterling Logistics, depending entirely on her strategic decisions. Marcus finally understood that he had been living with someone far more capable and dangerous than he had ever imagined, and that his public dismissal of her expertise would have consequences he was powerless to prevent. The announcement came on a Monday morning that would be remembered as the day the logistics industry witnessed the most dramatic corporate reversal in decades. Phoenix Logistics officially launched with an initial client roster that included 5 Fortune 500 companies and operational capabilities that made traditional logistics providers look antiquated by comparison. Elena stood in the glass-walled conference room of her new headquarters, watching as Sterling Logistics employees arrived for what they believed would be routine job interviews. Instead, they discovered comprehensive presentations about Phoenix Logistics' strategic vision, competitive advantages, and opportunities for equity participation in what industry analysts were already calling the future of supply chain management. The exodus began with David Chen's formal departure, but accelerated rapidly as other senior employees recognized that Elena offered everything Sterling Logistics lacked: advanced technology platforms, strategic industry partnerships, and most importantly, leadership that understood where the logistics industry was heading rather than clinging to outdated business models. Michael Torres submitted his resignation Tuesday morning, followed by Sarah Kim and Operations Director Rebecca Walsh that afternoon. By Thursday, Elena had recruited 12 of Sterling Logistics' most valuable employees, including half the sales team and 3 senior engineers who possessed intimate knowledge of the company's operational weaknesses. Marcus watched his company hemorrhage talent while being powerless to prevent the defections. His attempts to negotiate retention packages failed completely when employees explained that Phoenix Logistics offered superior growth opportunities under leadership they trusted and respected. The client defections proved even more devastating than the employee departures. Hartwell Industries, already disappointed with Sterling Logistics' performance, immediately signed a comprehensive logistics contract with Phoenix Logistics worth $42 million annually. Their CEO Jonathan Hartwell praised Elena's strategic vision and technological capabilities in industry publications that served as endorsements for other potential clients. Peterson Manufacturing followed within days, terminating their Sterling Logistics contract to join Phoenix Logistics based on Elena's demonstrated crisis management expertise and superior understanding of their operational requirements. The automotive manufacturer's procurement director specifically cited Elena's regulatory knowledge and international trade expertise as decisive factors. Elena had anticipated these client transitions and prepared Phoenix Logistics to absorb Sterling Logistics' most valuable accounts seamlessly. Her strategic planning included recruiting specific employees who understood these clients' operational needs and could maintain service continuity throughout the transition period. The industry recognition came swiftly and overwhelmingly. Logistics Management magazine featured Elena on their cover as Entrepreneur of the Year, describing Phoenix Logistics as the most innovative startup in supply chain management. The article detailed her professional background and strategic vision while noting the dramatic employee and client migrations from Sterling Logistics. Trade publications throughout the logistics industry covered Phoenix Logistics' launch as a transformational development that would force established companies to modernize or face obsolescence. Elena was invited to speak at major industry conferences where audiences of logistics executives listened intently to her presentations about predictive analytics and supply chain optimization. Marcus found himself increasingly isolated as former clients, partners, and even industry colleagues began treating Elena as the legitimate authority on logistics innovation while dismissing Sterling Logistics as a declining legacy operation. The social dynamics at industry events reversed completely, with Elena receiving deference and respect while Marcus was treated as an afterthought. The financial collapse accelerated beyond Marcus's ability to control. Sterling Logistics lost 68% of their revenue within 90 days as clients followed their preferred account managers to Phoenix Logistics. The remaining contracts were smaller, less profitable accounts that couldn't support the company's overhead structure. Elena's strategic advantages became apparent as Phoenix Logistics implemented technologies and business processes that Sterling Logistics had rejected consistently. Predictive routing algorithms reduced delivery times by 35%, while automated compliance monitoring eliminated the regulatory violations that had plagued Marcus's operations. The venture capital community embraced Phoenix Logistics enthusiastically, with additional funding rounds oversubscribed by investors eager to participate in what they recognized as a generational opportunity to reshape logistics industry standards. Elena's business model combined operational excellence with technological innovation that created sustainable competitive moats. Marcus attempted to compete by implementing desperate cost-cutting measures and promising service improvements that his diminished team couldn't deliver. His presentations to potential clients became increasingly defensive and reactive, focusing on legacy relationships rather than strategic capabilities that clients actually needed. The personal humiliation accompanied the professional destruction as Elena's success became impossible to ignore within their social circles. The same business leaders who had laughed at Marcus's jokes about Elena's supposed incompetence now sought her advice about logistics strategies and industry developments. At the Meridian Club's quarterly dinner, Elena occupied the position of honor as the evening's keynote speaker, discussing supply chain resilience and technological transformation before an audience that included Marcus sitting silently at a back table. The contrast between their respective positions could not have been more complete or devastating. Elena's presentation that evening was masterful, demonstrating comprehensive understanding of global logistics challenges and innovative solutions that positioned Phoenix Logistics as an industry leader. The same executives who had dismissed her 18 months earlier now hung on her every word and requested private meetings to discuss potential partnerships. Marcus left that dinner knowing that his social and professional standing had evaporated permanently. Elena had achieved recognition and respect that he had never possessed, while his own reputation for arrogance and poor strategic judgment preceded him wherever he went within the business community. Sterling Logistics filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months after Phoenix Logistics launched, unable to service debt obligations without adequate revenue streams. The company that Marcus had built over 15 years collapsed entirely, while Elena's startup achieved unicorn status with a valuation exceeding $1 billion. The employee testimonials during Sterling Logistics bankruptcy proceedings were particularly damning for Marcus's reputation. Former staff members described a leader who dismissed expertise, ignored market trends, and created a culture where strategic innovation was actively discouraged rather than embraced. Elena appeared as a witness during the bankruptcy hearings, providing professional testimony about industry conditions and competitive factors that had contributed to Sterling Logistics' failure. Her analysis was thorough and objective, demonstrating the strategic expertise that Marcus had rejected while documenting the preventable mistakes that led to the company's destruction. The courtroom proceedings revealed that Elena had offered comprehensive solutions that could have saved Sterling Logistics if Marcus had possessed the humility and wisdom to recognize her expertise. Instead, his arrogance and dismissive behavior had created the conditions for his own downfall. Phoenix Logistics continued expanding rapidly, acquiring smaller logistics companies and implementing Elena's strategic vision across multiple markets. The company became a case study in business schools as an example of how innovative leadership and technological integration could disrupt established industries. Elena's personal wealth grew substantially as Phoenix Logistics achieved successive milestones that triggered equity appreciation and performance bonuses. Forbes magazine included her in their list of most successful female entrepreneurs, noting her transition from dismissed wife to industry pioneer as an inspiration for underestimated professionals everywhere. The industry transformation Elena had predicted became reality as traditional logistics companies struggled to compete with Phoenix Logistics' technological advantages and strategic partnerships. Companies that failed to modernize quickly faced the same fate as Sterling Logistics, while those that embraced innovation found opportunities to license Elena's technologies and operational methods. Marcus's attempts to rebuild his career were hampered by his reputation for poor strategic judgment and dismissive leadership style. Former employees and clients provided references that documented his inability to recognize talent or adapt to changing market conditions, making him effectively unemployable within the logistics industry. The final humiliation came when Marcus applied for a mid-level management position with a regional logistics company, only to discover that the hiring manager was Rebecca Walsh, his former operations director who had joined Phoenix Logistics and was conducting due diligence on potential acquisition targets. Walsh reviewed Marcus's application with professional courtesy but ultimate rejection, explaining that his management style and strategic approach were incompatible with modern logistics operations. The interview concluded with Walsh offering Marcus advice about developing humility and respect for expertise regardless of its source. Elena's success extended beyond financial metrics to include industry leadership and social recognition that Marcus had never achieved despite 15 years in business. She served on boards of logistics trade associations, advised government agencies on transportation policy, and mentored emerging entrepreneurs who valued expertise over ego. The story of Phoenix Logistics' rise and Sterling Logistics' collapse became legendary within business circles as a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing competence and the inevitable consequences of arrogance over substance. Elena's transformation from dismissed wife to industry leader inspired countless professionals who had experienced similar underestimation. Marcus spent his remaining years working for companies that valued his operational experience while limiting his strategic authority, a humbling arrangement that reminded him daily of the opportunities he had squandered through pride and prejudice. His former colleagues occasionally shared news about Elena's continued success, achievements that served as permanent reminders of his catastrophic misjudgment. Elena's marriage to Marcus ended quietly through divorce proceedings that highlighted the dramatic reversal in their respective fortunes. She retained ownership of Phoenix Logistics while Marcus received a modest settlement that reflected his actual contributions to their shared success, which had been negligible compared to her strategic leadership. The epilogue to their story played out in industry publications that covered Elena's continued expansion into international markets and technological innovation, while noting Marcus's transition to advisory roles with smaller companies that appreciated his operational knowledge within limited scope. Elena's final vindication came when Phoenix Logistics acquired the remnants of Sterling Logistics' physical assets at bankruptcy auction, purchasing warehouses and equipment for implementation in her expanding network. The acquisition was handled professionally and objectively, demonstrating Elena's focus on business strategy rather than personal revenge. 10 years later, Phoenix Logistics had become the largest privately held logistics company in North America, with Elena recognized internationally as a visionary leader who had transformed supply chain management through technological innovation and strategic excellence. Her success stood as permanent proof that competence ultimately triumphs over arrogance when given appropriate recognition and resources. Marcus's legacy remained tied to his spectacular failure to recognize and utilize the expertise that could have saved his company and enhanced both their lives immeasurably. His story served as a perpetual reminder within business education about the importance of humility, respect for competence, and the devastating consequences of allowing prejudice to override professional judgment. The moral of their story resonated far beyond the logistics industry, inspiring anyone who had been dismissed or underestimated to pursue their potential regardless of others' inability to recognize their capabilities. Elena's triumph proved that true competence always finds a way to succeed, even when faced with systematic dismissal and institutional prejudice. What did you think of Elena's incredible transformation and ultimate triumph? Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated only to prove their doubters completely wrong? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if Elena's story of justice and vindication resonated with you as much as it did with me.